Hi, my name is Cyril War.
And my name is Bryan Royk, and welcome to the Shaping Spirit podcast. We're just a couple of California guys who collected a bunch of degrees and have traveled all over the world studying spirituality to bring it right back here to the West and uncover and explore with you what it means to be spiritual, what it means to develop spirituality, and in the most material and spiritual sense at the same time, how do we shape spirit? How do we shape ourselves? Very much like going to the gym and lifting weights. We are going to the spiritual gym and lifting some spiritual weights. So let's have a little bit of fun with this. And in honor of Halloween, for those of you who celebrate, we are going to discuss something that we thought would be very fun. And the topic for today is the psychology of fear.
You saw those bumper stickers that say "No fear."
Yeah, that's a clothing company. You know, I think a California-based clothing company. I think for surfing.
Oh, no way!
Right? Yeah. So that's been popular for years, and you know why we wanted to discuss this today is it's so interesting how fear dominates our lives in so many aspects and so many facets of what we do day to day. And I was curious, Cyril, do you remember the first time you were afraid? What's the earliest memory you have of being afraid?
Yeah, actually, I thought about that, and a vivid memory that comes to mind is I was on a ski trip in the middle of summer in the West, like, you know, in America, because my mom had some friends in actually, the Bob Purcell, who's like this big donor at Cornell University, and he had this hotel in Portillo, Chile. And his wife was my mom's best friend, this Chinese lady, Wendy Purcell. Long story short, I was like 8 or 9, and you know it's Southern Hemisphere there, so it was winter, and so we went skiing. What a stupid idea to go skiing, you know, during your summer holiday. But anyway, and so I was going down, and so it was really foggy, really foggy. And I was skiing alongside my mom, and we got to the bottom of the slope, and somehow, like, she stopped before me, and I continued. And then I always remember this, like I ended up maybe, I don't know, 50 yards down the slope. And if the sun was up, you know, no problem. But it was so foggy, like I couldn't see, like, you know, 5 feet in front of me. And all of a sudden, I'm like all alone, surrounded by this fog. I'm 8 years old. There's like literally nothing and nobody around me. And I remember I was just like screaming. My mom, I was like, "Mom!" like yelling. And she came like maybe 5 minutes later. But for those 5 minutes, or for those 2 minutes, or however long, maybe it was just 30 seconds, but it sounded like, you know, it felt like eternity. I was like so scared, uncertain, right? The fear of the unknown, fear of the unknown. Right?
That's always what it is, right? It's like the fear, when we really kind of try to unravel what fear is about. And one thing I want to do, I definitely wanted to.
What about you?
You know, I'm going to get there.
Disclose
yeah,
to us.
No, I absolutely will. But what I was going to say is one of the things I wanted to make sure the audience is aware of is this podcast is not about describing chemicals and chemical reactions. Okay, there's plenty of podcasts if you want to go out there and listen to a scientist tell you about how a chemical interacts with another chemical, and that's what creates your life. Go ahead, have fun with that. That's not what Shaping Spirit is about. We definitely take a more empathetic approach and what we consider a much deeper approach to this.
Maybe a consciousness-based approach?
Yes, a consciousness-based approach, absolutely.
With the premise of consciousness is not material.
Exactly. And we're really looking at this from a consciousness-based perspective. So my earliest memory, believe it or not, I was a toddler. And I remember being in a Japanese restaurant with my parents and their friends. And I remember it was very dark and I was in a high chair. And I remember staring at the walls, looking at all these Japanese kabuki masks. And seeing those kabuki masks when I was a kid and so little scared the hell out of me because I'm looking at these masks and I thought that they were alive. I thought that the way that these faces were shaped in the mask, I thought they were going to jump off the wall and attack me. And
And you
I
have
remember
memory
that,
of that.
deeply. Yeah, I remember it to this day. Yeah, but it carried me through because over time, by the time I was 7, I had already embraced martial arts, right? I've been a martial artist for 90% of my life. I have my own martial arts school. So it actually drove me into the direction of what I was afraid of. And now I have, as I grew older, I had a deep appreciation for kabuki theater, studied it, tried to understand what it was, and tried to learn and understand the way of the samurai, reading all kinds of books and looking into it and really embracing martial arts to take something that was a huge fear for me and then actually dovetailing it into something that I embraced and grinded out into making a successful path for myself.
So it was almost like, the horse, like you fall off a horse and then if you like get back up on it, then you're no longer afraid of them.
Right. Yeah. It was, it was something like that. And I think, a lot of times what happens in life when we're looking at something that we're afraid of, we go in one of two directions, right? We become afraid of something, and usually, like yours, it's the fear of the unknown, and we run in the other direction, right? We get afraid, we run away. Or the other way we turn is we run into the fear. And as you run towards the fear, where does that take you? And that's where I think the beautiful adventure begins. Right? Like what is really, if we break this down, and this is what, we're going to do today, is kind of break down the aspects of fear and how it drives us psychologically. That's why it's the psychology of fear, and how it shapes us in terms of how we interact with our world. Because I think as I'm sure you would agree, most people don't understand is how our world shapes around us is based on our own personal internal realizations and how we react to things. And it's our reactions that shape our world, not just necessarily a rock falling onto the ground, right? So
there's a lot more fear than we kind of like to admit. And I really agree with you that if we take an objective look, fear is like 80% of, whatever. I'm throwing that figure out sort of randomly, but not that randomly. It is a huge factor in decision making and just, in making this world turn. Fear as the motivating factor, right? Defense, because fear implies, defending myself, defending my property, defending my money, defending my loved ones. And that's legit, of course, but like you say, it's based on fear.
Yeah. We can break it down literally into 4 categories, right? Eating, sleeping, some form of intimacy, right? Interpersonal relationships, and defending, right?
So like human life, right?
Yeah, human life. And so when we break this down into these little aspects, right? It's just like we're afraid of everything based on, okay, we're always looking for what's our next meal? Where are we going to get the food? Where are we going to go out to eat? I got to go grocery shopping.
Sophisticated way.
Yeah.
You look at birds in the street and they're like,
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So and then
more refined versions of that.
Exactly. And then we have to have a roof over our head, right? It's just like that's a fundamental need which drives us to succeed, right? Totally. If you have a family, what do you want? You want to have a roof over your children's head. You want to have food on the table. You want to have a solid relationship with your partner.
You want to have 5G internet.
Exactly. Have that 5G internet, right? So if you look at what drives us, so much is motivated by fear. And you look at what's going on in the world around us now with different conflicts, and we have like Russia, the Ukraine, and all these things. It's like everything is motivated by fear. You look at the news. Everything on the news is fear driven, right? And fear to do what? What is it motivating us to do? Typically, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. To me, typically, fear drives us to consume, right? Fear drives us to, remember when COVID happened, I can tell you, down on my street, all in my neighborhood, fear drove everybody to buy as much toilet paper as they possibly could. Right. Why? I have no idea. But the fear of, whatever a respiratory virus was going to do made everybody run out and buy and literally hoard toilet paper. which blows my mind.
No, we couldn't buy ivermectin, huh? Well, that's another topic.
That's another topic altogether. But if you look at like how it drives us, how it motivates us, look at in the corporate world, right? Look at how many people work out of fear. Most people will work a job 9 to 5 for 25, 35 years, retire, work a job that they were miserable in, retire with, a sore back, sore knees, sick, right? All kinds of ailments because they were afraid to
and you
take
see
a
that
leap of faith.
You work in pharmaceuticals as well.
Yeah. And so it's amazing, but here's the thing, and I'd love to get your input on this. How come certain external factors motivate us with fear, and then other external factors we have complete faith in? And I'll give you an example, and I'd love to get your input on this in terms of what you think. When you have a child, right? You don't have a baby and go, oh my God, I need to stay up every night for the next 18 years, 24/7, get me some Adderall because the child's going to die at any second. It doesn't happen. There's a certain thing that comes over you where you kind of grow into the natural process where you trust, if you want to call it the universe, you can trust that spirit, the undercurrent of the divine spirit. You trust Mother Nature. You have faith in something that brings you closer and literally drives you to move forward in that connection instead of running away. Otherwise, everybody who would have a baby, either they're going to tape their eyes open to stay up 24/7 to make sure the baby breathes and as they grow up, right? Or they're just going to drop the baby off somewhere and run away.
But there is fear, though. I mean, I haven't had a child. I never gave birth. Obviously, I'm a man, but I'm not a father, so I can't really speak from experience. But you're a father, so isn't there? Now your kids are a little bit grown up, but weren't you afraid though as they were growing up, like when they were toddlers? Don't tell me that you weren't worried.
No, I was. You have a certain healthy concern. Right, in terms of who's going to be around my children.
See and hear examples of mothers, especially like freaking out because their kids are not eating, or, I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that there's a lot of sort of maybe not fear, but anxiety on behalf, out of love for your offspring's well-being.
I think, and you're right. There is a healthy anxiety, right, because you want them to thrive.
You want them to survive.
I think, yes, but it's beyond survival. It's thriving. You want them to thrive.
Right.
And so I think there's a difference in having this anxiousness that the child thrives versus a fear of the child being dead in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. Right. We take our kids to school every day, right? When you're a parent, you drop your kid off at school. And of course, there's been, numerous terrible tragedies where things have happened, school shootings and all kinds of horrific violence. And I don't ever want that to happen to anyone ever again. But, it has existed and it does exist. But none of us as parents are thinking like today's the day. Oh my God, what if today's the day where my kid gets murdered or, my kid doesn't wake up?
So you're contrasting that to what?
To actual fear. Like people are so afraid of, am I going to lose my job because my performance is in jeopardy,
in some sense,
right?
They're, like you say, they have faith in a sort of
in nature
system.
There's a certain
nature,
there's a natural system.
Like this irrational fear of, like you say, losing one's job, or like here's another example of fear, which I think is very common, and I think everybody can relate to. The fear of rejection. Yeah.
So if we look at
relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at the psychology of fear, particularly with interpersonal relationships.
Did you ever see that experiment that was filmed where like you have someone comes into a doctor's, office and is sitting in the waiting lounge, and there's like 10 people in there and they're all actors, right? And only that person doesn't know. And then like one of them like stands up for no reason and does some weird gesture with his hand, and everyone else, right? Everyone else does the same thing. And the person's like, well, what? And then they all sit down again, continue talking, and then, 30 seconds later. Did you ever see that? And then they do it again.
I've never seen that, but I saw recently a video. It's actually kind of towards your point.
Where there was some out of fear of not fitting.
Yes, there was people running down the street. It was like a jogging club, and they were running down the street. And these people at a restaurant saw it, and then everybody else that was sitting outside at the restaurant gets up and starts running down the street, following the joggers because they thought something was coming. Right. So we have this. If you really look down deep, right? There's this fear, like you're saying. There's a fear of lack of fitting in, right? So how that motivates us is crazy.
When I was in high school, especially like my 11th and 12th grade in Santa Monica, like I was born in LA and stuff, but I did grow up in France. My father was French, so I have that Franco side to me, right? And I felt so like insecure vis-a-vis like the in crowd. There was like this group of like 10 or 20 guys who kind of like were the most popular guys, and I remember like trying so hard to please them and to just look cool enough so that they could like grant me their freaking audience, and maybe accept me into the group for an afternoon. I mean, exaggerating a little bit, but I did have my own identity and my own set of friends and so on. But still, though, I remember how much it was like it felt uncomfortable and demeaning. Now I think, in retrospect, to want to be part of to be seen favorably by so-called popular people or powerful people, and it's embarrassing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to it's just like our perception of ourselves, right? Totally. How do we perceive ourselves in that pecking order of what we see as popular or acceptable? And it's almost like we go into these environments where we tend to accept it. Yeah.
Sorry, but
you have to know yourself.
Plato here,
No.
Like know thyself. I mean, if you really are in touch with your inner self, then like you don't care what others think of you, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's rare. But think about that. Think about how rare that is. Most people, if they don't fit into a group, right, they will wilt like a dying flower. They have to have that sense of, dare I say, sameness and acceptance. They want to be accepted as the same versus being accepted for being an individual. There's an old saying, unity and diversity, right? So being able to accept diversity and have that sense of unity and individuality. And there's an ancient concept, that you and I are aware of called simultaneous inconceivable oneness and difference. Right. And really, one of the best explanations I received from that is like sparks to a fire, right? Every spark of a fire is individual, and then, the fire itself is whole.
Right.
Or fingers on a hand, right? So every finger is individual, yet the hand is one unit. It's one functioning unit. So how we have to see ourselves in society and see ourselves in group is individuals,
that healthy
right?
Balance, right?
Has to be a very healthy balance, right? Because that is such a crippling fear that I think most people have. It stunts them from progress. And if you think of, go ahead.
Well, I think of two extremes here. One extreme is like, and I'll explain real briefly, like the Matrix, for example, on one side, and the other side is, the typical we are all one ideology that you find all over the world, in terms of philosophy or theology. And I think these are two extremes that don't that obfuscate what you just spoke of, namely this healthy balance between recognizing that we are all individual persons with our own individual, character and consciousness and personality, and no one is the same as us. We're completely unique individuals, each and every one of us. And yet we're, one also in the sense of being part of a greater whole, or being part of the same, let's say, universal family with other individuals, right? And so on the one side, you have this idea that, there's this philosophy of, there is no distinction between the self or between selves. We're all one. We're all one. We're all one. And then you even see that in media, in the media, or in political movements. I mean, I even mentioned that, in some way you could say, like, this idea, for example, the woke ideology of trying to reduce men and women to the same exact identity, where there's absolutely no difference at all between men and women, So it's like that's cutting away at the idea of individuality and distinction between individual beings, right? But on the other side, on the other extreme, you have the Matrix example, where you're living in your own universe and you're like, so, and everybody else is radically different from you, completely radically different from you. And that's another unhealthy, extreme. You get what I'm trying to say?
Oh, absolutely. I think it kind of plays into what we've learned. I said we weren't going to talk about science, but I'll throw this out there. They're talking about the human genome, right? And our DNA, I think, is like something like 99.99% the same, right? So our degree of sameness in terms of as human beings, of our genetic code is like virtually 100% the same. Okay.
And
what makes it so much difference, right? If you think about it, it's that little spark. It's that tiny little bit of spirit that makes it, that our consciousness makes us individuals. It's a beautiful thing, because if you think about it, we have so much in common, all of us humans. And then we have these tiny little bits of us that are so indescribable, so baffling to scientists. They say, we have no idea why we're all individuals, right? And how we're different. But even though we're 99.99 or whatever the percentage is, nobody quote me on this because I am not a scientist, okay? But whatever that number is, it's like virtually 100%. But it's that tiny margin that is not exactly 100% that makes us individuals.
Well, and speaking of that, what do you say then about the fear of facing the purported reality that we are individuals? Like, it's fearful to, because in one way it's easy to say, actually, we're all one. But if you're faced with, it's just like, remember Apocalypse Now?
Yeah, of course.
What was that? That movie was based on a book by famous author.
It was Hearts of Darkness.
Hearts of Darkness.
Conrad. Yeah.
Conrad, right? So there's an analogy, right? Where he goes into the heart of the Amazon forest, but actually he's going inside, right? Inward.
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me. It's an inward journey. And what's his famous saying when he finally reaches like the epicenter of his own heart? What does he say? Remember, he goes, the horror.
The horror.
The horror. Like,
that's self-reflection, right?
Right? He's like faced with his self. And I mean, it's a pretty, in some way we could say like, wow, the beauty, right? Why not the beauty, but here he's saying the horror. And since we're speaking of fear, I think, a lot of us are afraid to really admit that we're persons, because then that means that we have responsibility. Then then we're accountable. It's like Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialists. They as much as I don't like the existentialists, like, you have Jean-Paul Sartre, who used to say, and I thought that was cool. Like he says that, that everybody is responsible for his own existence, and you have to be accountable to nobody else but yourself. Like there's no one else that is responsible or that you could blame for, you have to, basically it all boils down and comes back to you,
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's the thing, right? we're so consumed with two things. Number one, the group think, or the group mentality, right? Herd mentality. But here's the other thing that I think freaks people out. You know, there's that saying, right? You're born alone, you die alone. You know, everything in the middle is, you can't take it with you. Whatever you think happens at the end of your life, you're there, you're going out by yourself. You know, even if it's a plane crash, you're still going out by yourself. And here's the thing, right? From a purely opposite end of our spectrum, atheistic, materialistic perspective. The atheist believes, right, there's nothing greater than themselves. But then there's that question that they are never able to answer is, what is themselves if it's not the material body, right? Because consciousness is a separate entity. And
I think so.
When we look at it, right, when we look at it and go, look, our tagline here, guys, on this podcast is, you are not your body. You're going to hear us say this over and over and over again. Your body changes. Even a scientist will admit the cells change, like every 7 years or something like that.
Maybe
right?
The brain cells less. But...
Yeah, whatever it is. You know, I don't have the same body I had when I was a baby. Neither do you, right? I don't have the same body I had when I was 5 years old, 20 years old. I've got 2 torn shoulders, bone spurs in my neck and my back, all kinds of stuff from,
But we believe, that you're the same person.
Yeah, exactly. So what makes you exactly your body changes, right? This is a fact. You can prove it
and
by your own
changes,
personal
if I may.
existence.
The body changes, but everybody knows that the body is approaching its destruction. In other words, death. And so, right? So, can we not say that fear
of demise, right? Of death,
fear of demise, like our own body, we're seeing it like disintegrate in front of our very eyes. And if we're identifying with it, then it's like, holy crap, I am dying like at every second.
Yeah, there's to quote one of my favorite bands, Iron Maiden, Bruce Dickinson says in a song, there's a time to live, there's a time to die, there's a time to meet your maker. There's a time to live, isn't it strange? As soon as you're born, you're already dying.
He says that?
Yes. And let me tell you,
not just the first one?
That whole thing, that whole thing. He says that in the song, and I've carried that around since that song came out, and I can't even remember what record that was on. It probably came out in the late 80s, and just took my kids to Iron Maiden recently, and they played that song. And
you must have felt really.
Oh yeah, it's such a transcendental, it's such a deeply spiritual idea, right? And to really go beyond that, for someone to sit back and go, wait a minute, as soon as I'm born, I'm already in the process of death. But what is death? And so for us to not be attached to death allows us not to be attached to fear, because fear is our perception of our external influences. And all fear is transient. Just like everything else, all of our experiences are transient. So we have to be able to transcend this concept of being fixated on fear, so
and
that we
on
can
matter
allow it
and
to
our
pass.
body.
Yeah, exactly.
Body is
right?
self.
It goes hand in hand.
That's what, remember I spoke about, there's one thing I find cool in this rhetoric that you hear a lot today, for example, in terms of gender issues, coming back to that point, just as a side, you often hear, I identify as, right? Mm-hmm. I identify as gay or heterosexual or bisexual, or there's a lot of different nomenclatures, right? But just focusing on this idea of I identify as, actually, that's actually really, really cool. Because to me, it means that there's a taking of a step of a meta, you're like taking a step back in terms of a meta analysis of your own self, and you're admitting basically to yourself and to the world that whatever you identify with, and that's totally secondary, you're not that, because you identify as, and so that implies that you are something else. And it comes back to your question. You're like, okay, if you're not this or that, this body or gay or straight or whatever, then who are you?
Exactly. And
it's a progress. It's a step forward. Right?
It is a step
in a way,
forward,
right? In terms of all,
absolutely.
Right in the midst of all what could seem like a sort of like crazy neurotic madness, there's a sort of a wisdom, a civilizational wisdom that has kicked in with this very notion of identifying as. I find it very positive.
It's interesting because this clinging to the concept of, okay, I am my body. And this is it. This is me. It's in my opinion, right? It's a very low grade thought process because there's so much more depth to who you are. We already know. Let's just embrace the scientists again. If 99.9% of us is the same on a cellular level,
why are you falling in love with Judy or with Nancy
or Frank or Bob or whoever, right? Exactly. Right. There's an individual. Why is it that maybe Joe falls in love with Bob and doesn't fall in love with Judy, right? There's that consciousness too. So their awareness is not within that cellular DNA. It's something more.
Yeah.
And how we embrace ourselves is how our environment, is how our environment's going to embrace us, right? We have to embrace ourselves first. We have to have our own personal self-acceptance in order to transcend the blockades of fear that we have, that psychology of fear that cripples us from doing what we should do on a daily basis, which is number one, speak our truth. Right? Embrace others for their individuality and be able to move in such a way in which we find a path in life in which we give of ourselves fully and not expect anything in return, right? This is the thing. This is what should be motivating us, right? How do I give? How do I give freely without fear of rejection? Without fear of ridicule, without fear of harm, right? And in such a way that I can make a difference in other people's lives. And in doing so, I will make the difference in my own life. Here. Yeah, but ultimately that's where we're going, right? At some point, we're gonna. These are
reminds me of that song "Pass It On" by Bob Marley and the Wailers. Remember, I love that line. Like, live for yourself, and you will live in vain. Live for others and you will live again.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. But like in order to live for others, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like this is like me first, like, okay, how can I, not be devoured by fear, right? How can I just start living as a conscious, spiritual, conscious being inside a physical body, Yeah. And then I can think of, being selfless towards others, isn't it?
Yeah, and
how can you be selfless, towards others if you yourself are like completely identified with matter and with your body, and therefore with the temporariness of material life.
Plastic surgeons are going to hate us for this because if you think about it, it is heartbreaking to me how many people in this day and age have just kind of dove into the deep end of plastic surgery and these medical aesthetics and all this stuff.
My mom got a facelift. I was like 10. We were back in LA, and I remember.
And for those who don't know, your mother was a beautiful model. It's just the woman was stunning. So in honor to your mother, when we see that,
she really didn't need one. Like it was so, and then and the thing is, it was so painful. Like her whole face, she was like, "Oh my god, it's like burning." Like she was like, for a few days, because they put like, bandages on your face. It's like,
yeah.
And I was like, I remember I was a kid and I was like, you idiot. I didn't say you idiot, but that's how I felt. I was like, you dummy. Like, why'd you do that? Like, hello? Why? Like, you don't need to. Like, materially, you're beautiful enough. And even why don't you just even if you are, if your skin is starting to sag, whatever, big deal. Like I don't think I had the concept yet. Like, you're not your body, mom. But I guess that's where I was going with it.
it's funny. I don't know anybody who's ever walked into a forest, looked at a 400-year-old tree,
right,
and spit on the tree going, what an ugly, disgusting tree, right? You admire it for its beauty, for its age, for what it shows, its bark, the aesthetics of the bark, how it's grown. It shows off its own beauty and it shines from within. Right. And I see that, predominantly, it seems predominantly with women. I know with men, it's very common, but, now also, but, the insecurity and the fear.
I see it a lot in your,
women have.
In your business field or in your circles?
Not directly with what I do, because my specialty is a little bit different. But the people around, look, living in Southern California,
it's famous. It's notorious.
It is
for that, right?
notorious for
worldwide,
medical aesthetics. Right? So everybody's got Botox. Everybody has lip injections. Everybody's got some kind of implant. From the front to the back and everything in between. And there's something to be said for somebody to have the confidence and the love, the self-love.
Yeah, the self-love.
This is who I am. And so much of self-love comes from how we take care of ourselves.
Remember
right?
Bruno Mars? Maybe that's why that song was so popular. I love you just the way you are. Remember?
Beautiful song. Yeah, beautiful song. And the thing is just like, look, sorry to break the bad news to people out there, but, we'll get into this in another podcast one of these days, but eating what's called the standard American diet isn't going to make you beautiful. I'm sorry. There are things, and it has been proven, there are foods you eat and things that you do that will age you faster. If you're drinking alcohol, it's going to age you. If you're just downing yourself with meat all the time, you're going to age faster. I'm sorry. If you're eating junk food and processed food, you're going to age faster. If you're not exercising, if you're not drinking water, if you're not overloading yourself with antioxidants, you're going to age faster and it's not going to age well. So self-love comes from, okay, let's look at our bodies as it's like a vehicle, right? I mean, how many people, let's just take the United States. How many people lease a car versus finance a car? Why am I saying this? Because when you're leasing a car, you're changing that car out, every 3 to 5 years, right? And then you're getting a new one. Why? Because you're dissatisfied with the car. It's getting older. You don't like how it looks, right? But all of a sudden, just because you changed the car doesn't mean you're not Cyril anymore. Just because you were driving a Toyota and then you went to a Mercedes or then you went to an Audi doesn't mean like, okay, I'm not Cyril. Now I'm going to be Hector. You've never done that, right? Whatever your car is, that's your car. So for us to be so bodily conscious and to be in this fear zone, right? When we have to realize that, guess what? This vehicle, this is a vehicle. Our material body is a vehicle. And we are conscious, every single one of us, anybody listening, and even if you're not listening, guess what? You are conscious. And you want to know something else? You matter. And
consciousness, if we may, is because, you can say, the physicalist, and we define physicalism as that paradigm or that philosophy that reduces consciousness to nothing but, chemical interactions in the brain, right? Exchanges of neurons and protons, period. End of story, right? So I lost my train of thought. But yeah, not only do you matter, but you as a conscious being are, that consciousness is not born from matter. I mean, that's what you have to be really convinced of. Remember that? I mean, we both love music, so it's kind of cool to quote songs, but remember The Police? I mean, many of our hearers probably, they know Sting, but, Sting was part of, and this is like going back to the 80s, but remember there was that one song by Sting and The Police, Spirits in the Material World.
Oh yeah, beautiful. We are spirits in the material world. Spirits. I mean, God,
you just gave a Madonna twist to it. You just give
sorry,
because she wrote right.
I wasn't. I'm not trying to do Material Girl.
Exactly.
No, but that's basically what they were saying. No, it's hard to remember the melody with these headphones on. But anybody can go listen to the song. Don't listen to me. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I can blame the headphones. I can blame whatever I want. Hey, I'll blame my faulty material body. Now that I'm not going to sing the song properly, but yes, spirits in the material world, the police, of course they had it right. And, being kind of accepting that you're a spiritual being having a material experience.
That's such a nice expression.
Right? It's that when you frame that as your reality, I think you're able to start successfully moving without fear.
It is huge.
I really do.
It is so huge. Just that one adjustment. I am spirit. I am not matter. Oh my God. Like everything changes.
I am not matter, but I do matter.
Yeah, I'm not matter, but I do matter.
Right? I matter, yet I am not matter. And being aware that we are spiritual beings in a material vehicle. Right? We're in a material vehicle, having a material experience. It's like, how is it any different than somebody playing, video game? They're playing Call of Duty or whatever they play these days. If you die in the video game, are you crying over it? No, you restart it, right? You start the game again. You go back to the last, spawn point or end point, whatever they call it. And then you keep playing the game, right? So to be wrapped up in the material body, thinking that this is everything. Here's the good news, ladies and gentlemen. This is not everything. Your world is meant to be fully lived from within. And the minute you tap into that is when you really start to see your own full expression, and also how it can actually reduce fear in your life, because then you're not worried about what happens next.
Because you're identifying with something that's eternal. That's one thing we have to establish, right? The opposite of matter, we can say, is consciousness. And by definition, consciousness doesn't die. Consciousness is not ephemeral. Consciousness is real and eternal. So all of a sudden, you're like, holy crap, I'm eternal.
Yeah. And matter is temporary. Every situation we have, if you look at it, you can go to any psychologist. What do they always tell somebody? They come in, a patient comes in, they say, oh, don't worry, this too shall pass, right? You will pass. Let's try this type of therapy or that type of therapy. Don't worry, whatever stressor you have, whatever fear, ultimately all these things I think really plays back into fear. I'm afraid this is going to happen. I'm afraid this is going to happen. I'm afraid to step outside. You have agoraphobics that are afraid to go outside their door. What are they called? It's temporary. Agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia. So, afraid to literally leave your house?
Yeah. It's like a fear of engagement with the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're stuck at home, locking yourself up and watching porn all day, which unfortunately a lot of guys do and women too, then that's just an extra factor in making you feel completely opposite of confident, completely insecure vis-a-vis real interactions with other beings.
And we're getting that way. If you take a look at what they're saying about Japan, they're saying that it could be the first country to kind of like their population to die out on their own, because the men and the women are not interacting with each other. They're not mating. And so they're having like a negative population problem. And what's happening is they're so focused on the digital, right? Yeah. And they're so focused on these, these fake universes, virtual reality. There you go, virtual reality, that they have no interest in. I've watched so many documentaries on this where you see a young man, he says, well, why would I have a human girlfriend when I can go home to my virtual girlfriend? She says everything I want her to say. I can have my meal. We can have a nice evening together, and I can go to bed happy. And I'm like, wow, you're totally missing out.
Ex Machina?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it. And I've had so many people recommend it to
you and the people who are hearing this podcast to watch Ex Machina. It came out, maybe 5-6 years ago?
I believe so.
And it's exactly what you say. It's like this guy who gets carried to a remote location in the middle of some Alaskan forest or something, and it's actually an experiment. He doesn't know about it. He's so-called hired by like the CEO of like it's this huge internet sort of big network, and like he, it's an experiment. He doesn't realize it, but the whole thing is about him interacting with this gorgeous like this robot, and it's fun. I love this part.
Oh, man.
Because speaking of and she's shaped according to his search history when he goes to watch porn, or whatever his likes. He track that, and then they make a fake woman that looks exactly as his dream girl, and at the end the robot actually wins and kills both him and. Sorry for the spoiler alert here, but
no, it's interesting, and it's funny because it's so opposite of I'd say probably my most impactful teacher in my life. He said to me and to other students many times, he would say, when you truly love someone, their faults become like ornaments on a tree, and you love those things. It becomes charming to you. Their faults become charming because the true depth of love isn't just something surface and superficial, but to really
back to
love
the same thing, right? There's
truly internal.
Yeah, you love the person, right? I mean, we hear that even just in regular just media, movies, a common saying, right? Like it's a person inside. You really, even like what's the person's character? You can't see character. No. You can't smell character. You can't see character with your eyes. It's definitely more subtle. And yet everybody's, unless they're like really Hollywood, whatever. I don't want to put down Hollywood, but, most people would agree in their moments of sanity that, if you're going to enter into a relationship, then the way the person looks visually is not as important as the person's character, right? And that's already starting to go deeper than just skin.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So then I guess the question remains for those of us that are pondering this topic in the psychology of fear. How do we go beyond fear? Like, what would be our step-by-step? What would be like a daily call to action for those people that are listening, for something that we can do to commit to, okay, what am I going to do for the next week? What am I going to do for the next day? What am I going to do for the next 30 days to get me to go beyond fear, to kind of disrupt that paralysis of the psychology of fear that I have in my daily interactions, right? With other people and other things. What would we do? Well, I think the first thing is we should really have that, wake up and have that affirmation. I am not my body.
I was just thinking the same thing. I swear to God. Because I was making fun of affirmations at the beginning of the podcast, but this is an affirmation that really does work.
This is it, right? This is like, I am not my body.
I'm not this body.
And
I'm conscious.
Yeah. We have to know that we are not this body, people. You're not your body. And when you embrace that, and then we go, okay, I am not this body.
And others are also not their body. So all of a sudden you're like, you're not black. You're not, Jewish. Your body is black. Your body is Jewish, but you are a conscious spiritual being inside that body. And then, I love this because, this goes even beyond, racism. This goes into the realm of speciesism, where you apply that same paradigm to other living, conscious beings, regardless of whether they're humans. Like you start seeing trees and freaking, worms and I don't know, butterflies and horses and pigs and whatever, snakes, exactly the same. Yeah. You're seeing that, that spark of consciousness inside. And that's awesome.
Yeah. It's, and that may be, for a lot of people listening, that may be a difficult pill to swallow. And to that, I would say, let's just start with humans. Okay, we know that that's the end goal, right? But let's even start with ourselves, right? What if we can't even go? What if we have
let's go back to ourselves,
an ex-husband, right? or some kind of, somebody in our life that was just made our lives a living hell. Right. And we go, you know what? They cannot possibly have a soul. They cannot be conscious because, they took half my money. I lost my house. I lost my cars and my boat. And, it goes on and on and on. But if I can just look and if I can just sit down and just say, I am not this body. This is a vehicle for me to use in the mode of giving, in the mode of goodness. And what do we mean by that? Giving without expecting, right? Because there's a great saying, the getting is in the giving. So the more we give, the more we will actually get out of it. That is our fulfillment. That is our nature as humans, to give. And not everybody's going to give in the same way. So don't expect somebody to give back to you or to give to you what you did. Right? Because everybody, and we'll address this at another podcast. I know we're getting a little long-winded here, but everybody has a different capacity to give. Everybody has a different capacity to love. Okay? So we can never hold other people to an expectation that their capacity is equal to ours.
Right.
And we have to accept where they're at. Right?
And when you start like more, identifying more and more as a conscious spiritual being inside a physical body, it's unfortunate, but you start realizing that like there's, the number of individual persons who what to speak of experience that, but who even try to, see the world through that lens is pretty small.
Yeah.
So all the more reason not to expect, not to have high expectations. And like you said, like then you start, feeling more and more, you start experiencing satisfaction from within,
Yeah.
On the inside.
Absolutely. I think, so if we kind of look at this, we can wake up every morning. I am not this body, right? This vehicle is a gift and I'm going to use it to give. Right. And, once we do there, we accept ourselves and we say, I matter. Others matter. I love what you do.
That's a great quote. Right? I'm not matter, but I matter.
Yeah. I'm not matter, but I do matter. As everyone matters. But focus first on I matter, right? Focus at home. Start with our own home plate, right? I am not this body. I am not matter, but I matter. And then focus on what can you give to the world today? What can you do?
From that place of truth.
From that place of truth. And it could be the tiniest thing. We're not talking about something big here where all of a sudden go write a donation to your local church or synagogue. Nothing like that. We are not saying that. We are talking about maybe you could help somebody say, hey, your shoe's untied. Or, hey, did you drop that? Let me help you. Or, hey, just maybe telling your spouse, your partner, you know what, you look great. Or, hey, thank you so much for everything that you do. Right? Or telling your children that you love them. Telling them, hey, you did an amazing job. Telling a coworker, hey, I appreciate you. Something to fill someone's cup, even in the tiniest bit, is going to ultimately make you feel amazing. And when we experience fear, we have to stop, take a deep breath, and acknowledge fear is transient. And this fear exists because I am identifying with the material factors around me. I am not this body.
Right.
What else would you like to add to that?
I think we could add, you are not your body. We're going to make that our end tagline, but we already came to it. Like, what do we finish with now,
Yeah. But I mean, is there anything else you think that the listeners should be aware of in terms of breaking through that psychology of fear?
Yeah, I think, we got to the crux of the matter. I think we really hit we threw the missile in that little slot in the middle of the Death Star, to use a Star Wars analogy. Like we really touched the heart of the issue. There's all sorts of factors that expand out of it, and that can be dealt with more specifically, with more with more specificity. But the crux of the matter, I think, is we've hit on it, we've touched on it. So I think it was great.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
And
until next week or until next podcast,
yeah.
Remember,
you are not your body. Thank you guys so much for listening to Shaping Spirit, and we will see you soon. Oh, also one more thing before I forget. This is important. If you have any questions or would like a topic for us to address, please email us. The email is as follows: info.shapingspirit@gmail.com. That is info.shapingspirit. Write that all together @gmail.com. info.shapingspirit@gmail.com. Thank you all so much.
Take care.